everybody, welcome to the Hello Road podcast, where we talk about unique and forgotten cars, road trips, travel destinations, racing, automotive journalism, our current car adventures, all that kind of fun stuff. My name is Ethan.
And my name is Paul.
And today we've got a special day. We're doing a Q&A, which I'm super excited about.
Yes.
We got a ton of great questions on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, Friendster, Hello. Yeah, all those platforms. I think we got a few.
I received a smoke signal too.
You did, exactly. Yeah, I thought the best question came via carrier pigeon. But okay. Yes, yeah, they crashed into the window. Unfortunately, the pigeon is dead, but it had a very good question attached to it.
The window okay?
Yeah, sad little claws. Yes, the window's fine. Window's fine.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So, we got a bunch of great questions today. We have so many that maybe we should just dive right in. Do you have any car stuff? Do you have any current project stuff that you want to talk about first, or should we just dive right into these questions?
I know that the car stuff can just take up the entire time, so we'll save that for next time. So okay. let's dive into this while I sit here and look up paint for my steel wheels.
Okay, that sounds good. All right. So the first question from our friend Rob E30. The year is 2003, and you're in search of a fun front-wheel drive car, and you hate Volkswagen Golfs. Interesting. So you've been given the choice of a Celica GTS, an Acura RSX Type S, or a Mini Cooper S. Which do you choose? And I know you've owned a Mini Cooper, so maybe you should start with this question, Paul.
Yeah, I saw this question and I was laughing because it was 2003, and I was searching
that's funny.
Searching for a fun front-wheel drive hot hatch, and yeah, I did have those choices. And I went with a Mini, and I actually owned that car for 8 years and made a ton of friends with it, and friends that I still have to this day from that silly little car. But he said Cooper S on that, and I owned a Cooper because I have to have the lesser of the car because that's just the way I am. So yes. In this case, for this question, I'm actually going to change it up and
really, okay.
Yeah, I am, and I'm going to choose the Celica GTS.
Really? Okay. So was that a car that you happened to cross shop with the Mini when you were looking at cars back in 2003?
It's not. And I can tell you when that whatever generation Celica that was came out in like the seventh generation came out in 98 or 99. I was if it was 99, I was a senior in high school. And I remember seeing that and I'm like, that's such a cool looking car, man. I want to buy that car when I get out of high school. Well, you don't buy a brand new car when you get out of high school. Well, most people don't, but I loved the Celica, and I really, really, really wanted it. And like before the whole Mini thing kind of was, I knew it was announced and stuff like that. And like around 2000, I was hell bent on getting a Celica GTS. I just loved everything about it. The little red badge is a GTS.
Okay.
So, yeah. So hands down for me, it would have been Celica GTS, which would have been a cool car. I mean, you rarely see them nowadays. You see a ton of RSXs, which is understandable, but I just don't think the Celica GTS or the Celica in general sold nearly as well as the RSX did.
I don't know. I'm not sure what the stats are on that. Yeah, interesting. So I was thinking about this question. So early 2000s car design for me, it's not my favorite. That's like not a good era for car design, in my opinion. And in stark contrast to your desire to have wanted a Celica, I feel like the 7th generation Celica is maybe the ugliest Celica ever created.
It's an acquired taste.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So this was 18 years ago.
Yes.
Almost 20 years have passed. I'm starting to warm up to it just ever so slightly, but when it first came out, I'm like, this is a heinous looking car.
I loved it,
especially the rear end. It is something about it that just makes my skin crawl. And I will say this: a lot of people like the RSX. I never really liked that design either. It just didn't really appeal to me at all. But again, I have stupid taste in cars, so And I got to say, back when looking back at 2000, so you got the Mini Cooper that just hadn't been out that long. That there's a certain allure to that. It was really exciting when that thing first came out. Nowadays, it's sort of nobody really cares anymore. But so back then, I probably would have gone for the Mini just because it was different and it was there was a lot of buzz around it. But I would say that those three probably would have never been cars that I would have even really spent too much time looking at. Mm-hmm. I probably would have done something stupid and something worse, like the Sentra SCR Spec V. I probably would have gone that route.
Yes, that was out there too. It wasn't a hatchback, but it was still in that same thing. Yes. I guess you can. The Honda Civic SI, the EP chassis, the little egg one, that was around at the same time too in 2003. So.
That's the one with the little weird ass shift lever.
Yes, the one on the dash. Yeah,
so that's totally what I would have gone after that. The Sentra, or how about out of left field? How about a Toyota Matrix with the factory TRD supercharger kit?
There you go.
So that car, it maybe doesn't really fit in with this whole question here, but that's probably what I would have wanted a wagon. I would have something kind of more wagon like. And that had 166 horsepower and it was pretty lightweight, so it maybe didn't handle very well. I'm not really sure, but that something a little different is probably what I would have gone with. Definitely not that
Wretched Celica,
eye stabbing worthy Celica. Sorry. We don't disagree often, but on this particular topic,
it just looks fast sitting there. That's the thing. Just looks fast. Those big old long headlights it had. Good old Celica.
Not good. Okay, so second question is from Wookie Automoto TV. It's also a mid 2000s question. Mm-hmm. So his question is mid 2000s muscle car challenge. Do you go for a 2005 Pontiac GTO GXP? Or a 2005 Ford Mustang GT? And I got to say that I am, it's funny that I kind of like the Mini out of the last question, but I was never a huge fan of the retro throwback Mustang, especially the first one.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably because I grew up during the Fox body era, and that to me was what a Mustang is. Mm-hmm. And people that grew up in the 60s and the 70s have probably thought the Fox bodies were garbage.
Right.
But that's just what I liked, and that's just the vibe of what I thought a Mustang should be.
Yeah.
And I didn't really care about Mustangs from the 60s and 70s. I still don't really care about them. They're fine. Yeah, they have a good history, and a lot of people love them. They sold a ton of them. So yeah, 2005 Mustang, it's fine, just not really for me. This is kind of a weird comparison because both these cars, just I don't know, they're not that appealing. Like the GTO just kind of looks like a bloated Cavalier.
Yeah, it does.
But I would say, like, if I had to choose between these two, like if I had a gun to my head, I'd choose between a GTO or Mustang GT. It's like I definitely probably go with the GTO just because it's a little bit more unique. It's kind of more of a novelty, even though it's kind of bland, But great engine under the hood,
right?
Especially later models.
Yeah, so I'm with you. Even though I owned a Ford Mustang, I did. I would go GTO all the way. It does look like a bloated Cavalier, just kind of like how the Chevy SS looks like a bloated Malibu or whatever. Yeah, and that's just kind of the obviously 2000s GM is not the best, but we got to remember with the GTO, this was really a Holden that was built in Australia.
Exactly.
And so it was therefore way more cool to have an Australian built car, at least to me, I think.
Sure.
I totally would have gone GTO. You don't, that's another car. It's like the Celica. You don't see a whole ton of them rolling around anymore. They didn't sell bad, but they didn't sell well. So, we're 18 years on, I guess, from when these cars came out. I guess they were 03, 04 was the first year they brought them here. And, they're still out there, and you see them every so often. But I think it's one of those cars that, 25 years from now, if you have a 25,000 mile 2005 GTO next to a 25,000 mile 2005 Ford Mustang GT, and we're on Bring a Trailer or whatever in 25 years, that GTO is going to just absolutely obliterate it, because for every
I agree.
one GTO there was 250 Mustangs that were made, or whatever it was, and it's just cool. I mean, it's cool to a degree. It doesn't look. It looked good, like I think it was like 2005 or 2006 when they put the hood scoops on it. Then it kind of looked more badass. And I think the first year had a single exhaust tip on it, so maybe Shit, do I change my mind to a Mustang because of an exhaust tip?
Well, yeah. Also, another data point is that I believe the GTO was called Illumina in some markets. So there's that. If you want to just be driving around in a Illumina.
The Paul of 2004, had he owned a GTO, would have debadged that thing so it said Illumina all over it.
Exactly.
Oh no, I didn't put the Holden Monero badges on it. It's got the Illumina badges.
Exactly.
Thailand or whatever stupid shit it would be.
Yep.
I picked Illumina.
Okay. All right. Next question. Brad Yesseldike. He's asked a few questions that I probably should just ask him if I'm pronouncing his name properly. I feel like I'm not. But so as we continue to wade deeper into the EV waters, how are you feeling about the retro style visions of the 70s and 80s classics? Mm-hmm. Thinking of the Renault 5, Honda E, 500e, Ioniq 5. Does retro style play better in a new segment, or would full futurism be a smarter approach? What do you think, Paul?
I think it plays way better because it's something familiar. It's like a blast from the past. You look at, we're talking a lot about Mustangs, but the Mustang, what is it called? The Mustang Mach-E.
Yeah.
If you're an automotive enthusiast at all, well, for the most part, everybody's screaming blasphemy that why are they calling this stupid electric SUV a Mustang? Okay, I get it. But for the majority of people that would be looking to buy this vehicle, it's called a Mustang. Oh, that's really cool. I like that. I see that. And you look at things like the Honda E, which I don't even want to talk about because I get upset thinking about the fact that car here, but it looks like a little Honda 600 from, the 70s. It's so cool looking. It wouldn't sell very well here, but it would be awesome that if it was here. And then just today, Renault brings out this, new electrified 5 that has those like tall tail lights in the back, just like the Lacars from.
I love it.
It's so cool. I love it. I think the retro flair to help usher in this new segment and everything of cars with the EVs is definitely beneficial it benefits the companies. Volkswagen, if they were to bring back the new Beetle and call it the new Beetle, but make it electric, it electric with the electric motor in the back. I mean, come on, and make it like,
that would be rad.
It would be totally rad. And I think they would sell a ton more of those than like whatever ID3 or whatever the name of their other electric car that is, it's going to sell well, I think, but it's very future forward and people are ready for that. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't think so. I think if they want to have a surefire hit, electrify something old, and that's what they do.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I love the retro stuff from the 80s and the 90s, especially the 80s. I mean, that's a design aesthetic that I really appreciate. The sharp lines, those super cool digital dashboards that, a lot of just the graphic design from that era was cool because in a lot of ways, a lot of the stuff that you saw in the 80s was the 80s vision of the future. So they were, there was a lot of looking forward in the 80s. And so a lot of these throwbacks now, those throwbacks to the 80s, they're sort of futuristic in a weird way because it's like, it's sort of like the, 30, 40 year old version of the future. So I don't know. In some ways, like I feel like I like the aesthetic personally. Like I really like the pixel taillights on the Ioniq. Those are really cool. That when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, totally love it. I just want to see one of these companies recreate the Subaru XT dashboard, digital dashboard. I love that. I want to see one of these. You got to start bringing back the 80s digital dashboard. So, but in some ways, yeah, I totally get it that nostalgia is kind of a cheap, easy way to get people excited about something. And you can't always look back at stuff. There's definitely something to be said by trying to come up with things that nobody's ever seen before. And, I would like to see more looking forward, but also just pick a handful of details that honors the cars of the past. So like those pixel tail, like when I looked at the Ioniq, I actually don't feel like it's too retro, other than the pixel taillights and the headlights that sort of harken back to like the 4 sealed beam headlights. You know, it's sort of like an LED version of sealed beam headlights. But in general, the whole car to me doesn't really feel like a retro car. So that's an example of something
It's a good mix. It's a good mix.
I think so.
It's like the Honda E, which is like blatantly this is supposed to look like an old Honda 600 or a Civic CVCC or whatever it is. I think a CVCC is kind of more what they're trying to go after, and and it stirs the emotions. But I think you're right. The Ioniq is kind of that nice little bridge where it's not too like way too concept. I don't want to even say concept car, but you have these visions of the future that like I guess it is like the display cars that you would see like at the LA or Detroit auto shows. It's like the vision of the Cadillac of the future, and it's like, well, how do you sit in that thing? Why is there 2.5 seats?
Why is the windshield 4 inches tall? How can you see out of it?
That's way too, that's just a design study, and like there's little tiny, fragments of it that would go into some future model, but that's we're not ready for that. This whole super futuristic thing. I think the retro thing is a nice way to ease it in as we start through this transitional period that we're in right now, where 20 years from now things are going to look considerably different on the roadways of the world. Considerably different.
That's true. Yes, and it's also important. This is a good time to plug the Autopia 2099 show that will be happening in December, assuming that COVID-19 plays nice and gets kicked to the curb. Yes, so will be tons of EVs, tons of really cool stuff you can see at the Autopia 2099 show. I
got to make my shirt that says
shameless plug.
I have to make my shirt that says I've ridden in an EV1.
You should. Yes, definitely. You should definitely do that.
Personal EV experience.
Yeah.
Under its own power.
Yes, that's pretty amazing, because not many people can make that claim.
I got to be good at something.
So related to the Mustang, we're going back to the Mustang again. We're talking about the retro stuff. We're talking about the future, all that jazz. So I just said jazz. I gotta stop drinking. Anyway, so Big Kex asks, what is your take on companies taking their most iconic models and turning them into SUVs and crossovers? Things like the Eclipse becoming the Eclipse Cross and the Mustang becoming the Mach-E, that kind of thing. So for me personally, I have absolutely no problem with Ford calling their basically Tesla Model Y or model whatever you want to call it, that competitor, the Mustang Mach-E. I know a lot of people hate that they use the Mustang name, but I have absolutely zero problem with it. And I think this is partially due to the fact that Ford used the Mustang name on the Mustang too. So why? That's like the most criminal act that anybody could have ever done to tarnish this name.
Right.
And it just completely abandoned what made the original Mustang a Mustang. Now, I know looking back today, lots of people like the Mustang 2 now. And tons of people bought it back in the day. And, you could go on like the Malaise Motors Facebook page, and, I don't want to say this is a bad car, but it definitely is something that never really appealed to me personally. And this was the first time that Ford said, hey, we're taking this iconic thing and we're just going to kind of paste it on something that fit the the era. It fit what was needed at the time. The gas crisis was there. They needed a smaller Mustang, but one school of thought might have been maybe they should have just called it something else, the Pinto Sport. But Ford knew that they would sell way more of them if they called it a Mustang. Mm-hmm. So, maybe it kind of sullied the Mustang name a little bit, tarnished the Mustang name a little bit, but it made sense. They sold a ton of them. So I have a feeling that this is a very similar case where they were like, okay, we need to make a splash in this EV world. They need to leverage what they've done in the past and, get the mainstream audience excited about it. There's tons and tons of people that know what a Mustang is. And those are they want to try to tap into those people that will see this kind of sporty electric car and be converted. Yeah. So I think if they called it something completely different, I think they probably have less of a chance to convert the skeptical people.
Like,
so it trying to make it like too futuristic and too like out of reach and too like, oh, that's the future. That's something weird. That's some like only those snowflake liberals in California drive electric cars. They need to get people that are that wouldn't even consider an electric car to buy one. And I think calling it a Mustang is going to do that.
Yeah. No.
Also being a good car. It's not just the name, obviously, but
right. It's got to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's in the name. It's in the marketing. People are going to say it. And I kind of touched on a little bit in that last question, but maybe not the looking at it from the electric car perspective, but like what we're seeing now, like as mentioned in the question about the Eclipse Cross, you know, I see that with Mitsubishi is kind of like their marketing, their marketing grab as they're trying to hold on with two fingers left on the ledge as they're dangling. Like they're going after the
Eclipse. What else are we gonna do? We have no idea.
Yeah. But their thought was, well, all these kids in the 90s and early 2000s, they all were hitting the streets in their Eclipses, with their GST turbos and all those other fun things. And now they got a family, so let's make a nice SUV for them. And let's make them remember the past by calling it the Eclipse Cross. And, and so that's like one end of the thing. It's kind of cringy in a way. Like
that one in particular.
That one is cringy. The Mustang one, not so much. I understand the marketing where it's like we're trying to reminisce a little bit about the past with the nameplate. But what's so hard with thinking about the new ones? I mean, Ford hasn't thought of a new name for a car. Think about it. When was the last time there was a new? Was the Probe? And
it's funny because the concept Probe came out in the 70s, I think. So they had that name in their pocket for a long time.
Okay, the Fusion.
Yeah, Fusion. There you go.
Okay, and I don't count things like the 500. You don't. That's
it's stupid name.
Stupid name. But like the Fusion. Okay, maybe it's a little sooner than I thought. But it's like when. Think of a new name for the thing. As the Mustang Mach-E is going to sell a ton of things, but when I first heard about it, and then I saw it at the LA Auto Show, I was like, why the hell, if they're going to call it after a famous Ford model and it's future forward, why don't they call the damn thing the Futura? But
sure. Yeah.
I don't work at Ford, so I didn't get to bring that up to them in the boardroom when they discussed it. So, it's one of those things. I don't mind that companies use the name for other things. That whole thing got ripped out of my heart back in the day when I had my Mini, and then all of a sudden all these other Minis start popping up that weren't necessarily Mini. Not that my Mini was Mini, and I'm going to see how many times I can say Mini in this sentence. But yeah, it was like, well, I guess that's just the way it is. This is the Mini Countryman. This is the Mini Clubman. This is the Mini Paceman. This is the Mini Roadster. This is the Mini Coupe.
And they try to make them all look sort of like a Mini. And I think that's actually the cringy thing for me is not the name Mustang. It's actually the taillights. I don't know what it is. It's just like, no, it's not a Mustang.
Yeah.
Like I get what they're trying to do. For me, it doesn't bother me because I don't really care too much about the Mustang nameplate, but I know there's some people that, deeply care about it. So
I'm sure there's a lot of strongly worded letters being sent. you take this name off of the car.
Well, that's the thing. That's also the Probe is going to be a Mustang. That's talked about that before.
Big one
again. I'm not sure that would have been a bad thing. I think the Probe is a better car than the SN95. I do. I know that's sad. Should I have said that out loud? Do I take that back?
I had an SN95, and it was fine.
Yeah.
It was cool. It was all right, I guess.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
I don't know either. Ford. God, so much Ford talk on this one.
Yeah, let's get off of it. Well,
I'm sure it'll be back in a second.
Well, we can't because I also wanted to mention the Blazer. So that's another one that.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so Blazer, the new Blazer, it's fine. It's a fine SUV. I test drove one. I had one for a week. It was fine. But, then of course Ford comes out and says and releases all these badass Broncos. And then I'm sure GM was like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
we totally missed an opportunity here. Now they've got this kind of sort of just. It's not sad. It's like it's fine. It's just an SUV. It's whatever. And they probably just feel like, oh, we missed the mark. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I do feel like that
car is going to be redesigned in 2 or 3 years. And it's going to be a lot different when it comes back. I think. Because they don't really have, because the not to get too off topic, but Ford doesn't, nobody really has any sort of true like Wrangler competitor, and I guess that's what Ford's really going after with the Bronco. And I've kind of shit talked Ford a lot over the time that we've been recording the show. But I actually don't mind the Bronco. I think it's pretty cool. If I had to choose between that and a Wrangler, I'd probably go with a Bronco. It just looks good. I like the way it looks. It's cool. It looks like it gets the job done. So if I was in the market for some sort of a fun trail off-roading thing that was new, that I'd be kind of stupid to buy one and wreck it on the trails, but that's another story.
Yeah.
A Bronco. It's cool.
Yep. All right. So we got another question from Team Radar Love. The question is for both of us, of course. If someone walked up to you and offered you 25% over market price for every single car in your fleet and guaranteed that they'd go to a good home, but you could only sell them all together, would you take the deal? So you've got the Daihatsu, the Fit, and what does your wife drive?
The CRV.
CRV. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All good cars.
Yeah. I'd probably take it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? I mean, at that price, I can buy the world's best Daihatsu. Best Daihatsu Charade, but I don't think my family would like to be schlepped around in the Charade.
No.
Yeah. Cars are replaceable and everything kind of has a price. So if somebody was to walk up to me and say, I want to buy your Charade for $5,000, I would get the pink slip and sign it off, because I can find another one. It's not going to be going on Craigslist and finding it that day, but I could find another one.
Sure.
It is, and especially if it's going to go to a good home. Yeah. Okay. Off you go. And the same goes with the Fit. Like, I can get another Fit and not a big deal if I wanted to, or I can choose to go some other way. And the same with the CRV, take it. And it's tan interior. Yeah, that's fine. Stupid tan.
Yeah,
totally. You're a bit more, you probably had to get NASA involved with the calculation for the vehicles that you own.
Okay. So, I think we've talked about this before. I am still not exactly sure how many cars I own, but the thing is, you don't think like, oh, Mr. Moneybags over here with a bunch of cars.
Right.
No, they're all garbage. And I paid next to nothing for each one of them.
Right.
So I just thought about this question for a little bit. But so I've got, I don't know, what is it, 13, 14 cars in the fleet at the moment. But I would say that, if somebody offered me 25% over market price and guarantee they'd go to a good home, I'd say, yeah, absolutely. Like you said, no car is precious. A car is just a piece of metal at the end of the day. Obviously there's cars that I love and adore, like my Chevy Nova twin cam. And I don't plan on selling it anytime soon or ever. But if the opportunity arose that somebody really wanted it, or what if GM said we really need a Chevy Nova twin cam for our museum, for our Numi museum, I'm like, okay, yeah, you can take it. But I'd sort of just view it as like an opportunity for a new adventure. So maybe you take the money and go travel, or maybe you take the money and buy a whole new collection of stupid oddball cars.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah.
So, it's like a lot of the cars that I have are unique, very unique, or just sort of obscure or rare, or like just you can't find them anymore. But that's fine. If they were going to somebody that was going to take care of them, that'd be great, because they probably do a better job of it than I do.
Oh, come on now.
Yeah, well,
there's been lots of cool pictures lately. I mean, that I'm just seeing that Stanza wagon is just making me all happy.
We'll talk about that in a bit. That's kind of a sore subject at the moment.
Oh no. Okay.
Yeah, you probably just saw my positive Instagram story about putting the new fuel filter in, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay. So Brad Hansen, who has been on the show in the past, talked about Star Cars. I think it was like maybe episode 3 or 4 or something like that. So his question is probably a little bit more for me, because the sheer number of cars. So how are your neighbors with your car collection? I know neighbors hate seeing a bunch of parts and engines and tarps strewn about the yard, but wonder if they're okay with a bunch of cars like yours that look decent and put together, but that's debatable, at least from a distance. Do any of them actually think your collection is cool? So I'd say when I only had like 6 cars, it was probably fine. But now that there's a lot more, it might be a little bit more. I feel more self-conscious about it. Nobody said anything. But the good news is that our house has a little side yard that's got it's really kind of like RV parking. So I can put a bunch of cars over there, like on the side, and it doesn't really look like I own that many cars.
Yeah.
If you came by my house and just drove by, you'd be like, oh, there's 4 cars there. But like, no, there's actually 14. But I will say this, I've had conversations at length with my neighbor across the street, and he's into the 80s cars. Like, he grew up in the 80s and he likes all that stuff. So he was chatting with me about the Ford Probe quite a bit. And actually, I think we talked a little bit about the Mitsubishi Galant the first day that I had it. And kind of was like, what is that? I haven't seen that in ages. But I think for this neighborhood in particular, a lot of my neighbors are into cars. So like a neighbor across the street, he's got like a couple old like Buicks from the 40s. I've got a guy down the street that races, and I feel like he races in the Baja 1000. We got another person that has like an old dude that's got a bunch of drag, like an Oldsmobile, like a 1950 Oldsmobile that he drag races. There's a guy down the street that's got an International Scout. There's a guy with a Volkswagen thing, and actually not too far from me is Alana Scher, who was on the podcast in the past, and she's got an Opel. She's got she got all sorts of cool stuff in her yard. So there's a lot of people that are into cars. I think we sort of lucked out and bought this house when the previous owners were divorcing. So we got a pretty good deal on like a pretty large lot, which is not really common in Los Angeles. So it allows for a lot of bad decisions because cars can be stored in many different places.
Lots of little nooks to hide. Yeah,
nooks and crannies. So
this is behind the tree that you can't see.
Yes, I have cars in the tree. Yes, there's everywhere.
Yeah, that's always kind of been, a thing is like, what does your neighbors think? Like, I only have one weird car, but my neighbors know it, and there's some of them that like talk about it. Like when I had the numbers on the side of it, they're like, "Oh, look, there's your little race car," and I was like, "Yeah, if I hadn't driven it for a while, I'd start it up and move it." And like, "Oh, look, it's in the street," and like, they know when it starts because it's got that horrible exhaust leak right now, so it sounds like an absolute mess when it starts up. Like, oh yeah, Paul's driving the charade today, so and there it goes. Yeah. Thwack, 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 thwack down the street. And
Yeah.
They put up with it. I don't have as many at least I don't think I have as many car enthusiasts in my neighborhood. My neighborhood's pretty small. But the Fit sits there, and it's got wheels on it, and it's lowered.
Yeah.
And people be working on them all the time, the cars all the time. So
sure.
I think I've kind of, I've been here for about almost 2.5, almost 3 years, I guess now. And, people are starting to be like, okay, so he's the guy that messes with his cars all the time,
Yeah.
and that's fine. I'm happy to be that person. So, I've had a couple neighbors come up to me, oh, what do you think about this? And I'm like, okay, so I'll give them my opinion. So it's totally cool. So I guess even if I have just the one car, it's still enough to bring the magnetism to my house. Like, hey, you kind of look like you know what you're doing, and talk about it. And I'm like, sure, buy a Corolla.
Yeah, exactly. That's the answer to everything. Please just buy a Corolla. And then they show up with like a Dodge Nitro. You're like, no, you did it wrong.
Bought the Nitro or a Journey or whatever.
Yeah. We don't want to talk about that. Okay, let's get back on the topic of fun cars. So Eric Roby, Rev Match TV, his question is, what is a dream rad era car that you'd travel across the country for? You've probably got several, right? I have 1,000 of these, but I narrowed it down to 2.
Okay.
So Renault Alpine.
Oh,
I just adore the way that car looks.
That's a beautiful car.
It's got a PRV in it, so it's probably not that fun to drive. But
just God,
looks awesome.
Gorgeous.
And then I would also say Lotus Esprit Turbo. I actually think maybe I'm more into the pre-rad version, like from the late 70s.
Okay.
So I would say that the 2 cars that I picked to go across country for, neither would make it back to LA. I take a tow truck for most of the trip, probably.
Oh, yeah.
What about you?
Well, I mean, obviously, if there's a low mileage charade, I'm gonna if it's the price is right, and there's not a pandemic going around, and I can hop on a plane, I'd gladly cross country a charade. It would be tons of fun.
And that's gonna make it away.
Yeah, and it'll make it. But no, I have to think outside of the very small Daihatsu size box that my brain lives in. And there's so many cool choices, but like something that I've kind of always wanted to get would be like, I mean, I do have a thing for Previas, so it would be a fun one to like. I think like if the right low mileage, like right spec, good condition Previa popped up in like New York, I think it'd be fun to like get the family on a plane, go fly over there and cross country like a Previa back here, or maybe it doesn't have to be a Previa, maybe kind of more of an adventure type of thing. I would, at least.
That's a good call. So it's more about the adventure of going back in the car. The car is actually maybe a little secondary.
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be one thing I would go across the country for. But like just a car overall in itself, it's hard for me to break out of that little Daihatsu size box. And so Daihatsu. So it's like, I don't have a better answer than that.
Okay. So Eric has another question. What is a car that you would never buy again? And I feel like I might know your answer to this, but why don't you go ahead and tell me what you think?
Now we're talking about Ford again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I figured it was going to be the Fiesta, right?
Fiesta ST. Yeah.
Okay. So you've talked about this in the past. What's wrong with this car? Like, because I know a lot of people loved this car.
I hated the seats in it.
Okay.
That was the first and foremost.
That's kind of a deal breaker. I mean, you can replace the seats, but
like that was the thing. I spent the majority of the time when I owned that car, like looking on the LKQ site for a wrecked one that had the Recaros, because like I was like, I bought that car. I think really set off the tone for my ownership for the time I had it, because I bought it just the stupidest way I could have. I traded in my Mazda 2 that was like, fairly nicely modified and everything, just to get this. I got so over whelmed with the power of the car and everything, which wasn't even that fast, but it felt really fast when you're driving a Mazda 2 every day.
Yeah.
But it was the seats, but it was also the Ford's lack of accountability when it came to like the parts, like with the brake pads that wore down in 15,000 miles, and then they didn't have any replacement pads for it because they were being re-engineered. So I had to use my parts guy knowledge and skill and figure out a brake pad that was about the right size to fit from CarQuest while the Ford ones came in. And it was just, that it just really soured everything. And then the few times it had to go to the dealership for a repair, which was not something I was used to doing with cars because I had that Mazda, and it was flawless the entire time I owned it. But like, and just bad stuff at the Ford dealership, like, oh, the car had to stay an extra like 3 days because nobody in the shop know how to drive stick. And I was like, what the hell? It just all of it rubbed me the wrong way. It was just bad juju from the get-go with that car.
Okay.
So
yep. All right. Yeah, this is a tough question because I think about like a lot of the cars that I have now, I probably wouldn't buy again. Not because they're bad, but just because I've already experienced them. So like, for instance, I have this Mitsubishi Galant. It's an 85 Galant, a 5th generation. And it's cool. I love driving it around. But you know, I really only need to own that car once. I actually have a Jeep Grand Cherokee that I bought from a friend, and you know, it's just kind of a whatever car. I don't need to own a Jeep Grand Cherokee ever again. You know, it's not necessarily that they were bad. It's just that it just didn't really stir any emotion. You know, my initial thought was I would say I would never buy a Volkswagen Scirocco 16 valve ever again because that was absolutely the most unreliable piece of crap I've ever owned. But I love the way that car looked. It was fun to drive. It looks so super cool. I'd probably buy one of those again, even though it would ruin me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of ruining, TYJOZ Tyjaws asked, do you keep an extensive maintenance log to see your total cost investment for your vehicles? And I just like, when I saw that question, I just started laughing. It's like, no. But actually I will say this. I scan all my receipts. So I'm somewhat organized.
Okay.
Like I keep them, but I don't ever look at them because I'm afraid.
Yeah. The amount of money I've put into the Fit this last year was, it was quite a bit. And then the amount of money I've put into the Charade over the time I've owned it is like way more than the car is worth. But
yeah.
And it doesn't really have anything to show for it except for the fact that like it's never left me stranded. It starts up every single time. Everything's all good. So I guess I did something right there, but you know, only me would drop, you know, well over probably $2,000 or $3,000 on the car, getting it just to run really, really good. Not that it didn't in the first place, but just to like, you know, peace of mind on a car that's worth, you know, $500. But
yeah, exactly.
That's something only I would do. So no, I don't keep any sort of receipts or anything like that. Not even for the batteries, like, you know, the ones that you get from like, you know, Napa.
Oh,
I never
do that. So I actually had to use. Oh, I guess I didn't even need I didn't need the receipt though, but because I've had 2 batteries that have gone bad that AutoZone's replaced for free.
Yeah, and I always think like, I'm never going to need this, you know, and or I forget I have it. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You know, it's like, oh, it needs a new battery. When was the last time you got it? Oh, the tag says 2012. Oh, do you have?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, whatever. I'll just buy another battery. It is what it is. So,
all right. Speaking of fixing things, the real DeLorean dude asks, how's that purple probe doing? So it's running great. I've been driving that most out of all my cars lately. It still leaks a little bit of coolant, but not enough to cause any major issues. There's like this little coolant T where the 3 coolant lines connect, and that's leaking out of that. And I can't find that part. So It does, like, it smokes a lot still. So I need to do the valve cover gaskets and the intake manifold gaskets, which is not an easy job. So I'm actually going to outsource that to a mechanic because I'm a terrible mechanic. It's funny that I considered doing it for a second, and then I started looking online, and there's, when you do the valve cover gasket, the intake actually goes over the rear valve cover on that car because it's a transverse V6. It's all tightly packed in there. And apparently there's the quote bitch bolt that is so hard to get to that everybody that owns a Ford Probe is like, yeah, it's a bitch bolt. That's so annoying. And I guess it's a bolt that when people do this job, they just leave out. So if you're putting it back together, like, don't put the bitch bolt back in because you're gonna ruin it for the next person. And on my car, the bitch bolt is there. So apparently this is a bolt that you can't see. No matter how you try to contort yourself, you take the hood off, you do everything you can possibly do. Unless you take the engine out, you can't see this bolt. So you need like two people, a mirror, a stick of gum, and like a flashlight. And I don't know, like it's not an easy thing. So I'm outsourcing this particular project because I don't want to do it.
Fair enough. I think that's the best way to go with this.
Yeah.
Bitch bolt. Wow.
Yes.
All right.
So Dave 101 asked, do you enjoy pain? And he actually used to own a Stanza wagon, so he probably understands this terrible decisions I've made in my life to have all these awful cars that I put a lot of work into that never end up working right. Yes, I do enjoy pain. Cedric's GL asks, any update on the Lexus GS? I might have mentioned this in a previous episode, but the valve seals are bad. I haven't made a video about that yet because I put a bunch of money into this car. And honestly, I'm just kind of bummed about it and not really very excited about it. So I haven't made a video with it just because I don't want to. So I need to find a way to turn this project around. And the car had sat since 2016. I bought it at an auction for $600 or whatever, and thought, oh, it's a Lexus. It's a Toyota. How hard could it be? And so I put a bunch of money into it. It's got a new distributor, cap rotor, spark plugs, wires, harmonic balancer, like this intake boot. What else did we do to it? Mass air flow meter, a bunch of other stuff. And then it gets to the point where it's like it kind of barely runs. So the valve, basically what happens is the valve seals are just so bad that if it sits for a little bit, it's really hard to start. And when it does start, it smokes for like, half an hour. So the thing is, like, this car has 156,000 miles on it. It leaks like a sieve. I put a bunch of money into it. Like, I don't think it makes sense to put any more money into it, even though it's sort of a lost cause, I think. Like, even though doing valve seals might not cost that much, probably, I don't know if I'd need to do other work to kind of like get it up to speed, like gaskets and all sorts of stuff. And it's just a car that I'm not super excited about, and it's not worth anything. So I don't know. I was thinking I would rip everything out and put a Nissan Leaf motor in it.
There you go. That's a good candidate. It's a little heavy, but what the hell?
Yeah. I mean, it would be a pretty slow Lexus GS, but it's already really slow. It has like no power with all the problems it has. So
poor thing. Well, that is a damn shame. It's something I see about Toyotas. It's like, they run forever and they're great, but when they decide to bite you in the ass, they really bite you in the ass. It's just, it just.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's just because the car sat,
Could be.
Like, I'm not sure. So, I mean, maybe that has something to do with it. So, and it's, obviously it's got a 2JZ in it, but apparently it's the earlier 2JZ that has the distributor, and those really, nobody cares about those. I was thinking I could maybe pull it out and sell some of the parts, but I don't know. Maybe I could sell a few of the parts and make some of the money back, but we'll see. So I'll make a video with it at some point, but at this point, it's sort of just sad, sitting in the corner.
Behind the tree.
Yes, exactly. Walter Hummer asks, what happened to my dad's Toyota Tacoma? My brother bought it. So it's in California right now. He hasn't done anything with it. It's basically just in his parking garage, but It's still in the family. Grandma's Civic Si asks, this is not a car question. We actually do non-car questions on this podcast. What are the top 3 favorite bands for each of you? I know Paul is a big Gwar fan. So what do you think? Is just going to be Gwar's number 1, 2, and 3 for you?
No, I mean, well, if they're listening, I have to say that because I mean, they're out.
Exactly.
They're out for all of us. It's a really hard question to answer. I mean, both you and I are musicians, so it can kind of change, and I think even non-musicians, it changes around. Like I can say if I have to do a top 3, that I was thinking about this one after I read the question. For the better portion of the last 20 years, I've just been all about Rancid. Pretty much like a huge them, Operation Ivy, that whole circle of people,
like mid 90s punk kind of.
Yeah. Mostly with Rancid, I think was the biggest thing. But then it's about coming up on just past 4 years with one of my best friends passing away, and then just losing another best friends a few years ago now, and when that happened, it was just obviously traumatic. And as funny as it sounds, that's when like the whole finding Gwar and stuff came into play. And it was really funny because like the music itself, I mean, it's good music, but it's escapism to me because it's just so crazy and weird. And I've been to one of their shows, and it's so much, it's just fun, and it's exactly what I think music kind of needs to be. And it's just so silly. I love it though. I love it to death. So yeah, Gore's definitely on there. And then the other one stemmed off of it because I started playing music again, like after having some traumatic loss in my life, and just going through normal, late 30s, depression that everybody has, and started playing music again. And in that, I don't know how it happened, but it just, I became just this gigantic, enormous fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which is like the most cliche, like rock and roll band. But like
they kind of started off sort of underground.
No, they did. Like the music itself, like if you were to almost take if you look at it from a guitar playing perspective, and there's all the different eras, the different guitar players that they've had, it's the music is good from my point, that it's the guitar sounds and everything I'm trying to play myself now is very reminiscent of that. And so therefore they're up there. But I mean, you asked me this question a week ago, I would have just been talking about how much like Sonic Youth is awesome right now, because that's all I've been listening to, or My Bloody Valentine, whatever. It changes all the time, but I can say Rancid, Gwar, Red Hot Chili Peppers. What a combo.
Yes.
Fun things. So there you go. Go.
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't listened to Red Hot Chili Peppers other than when you flip through the radio and K-Rock is just like blasting
every other song.
But it's funny. I should go back and re-listen to some of that stuff, because I haven't listened to it since like high school. Because I do remember like listening to Mother's Milk way back in the day, and I remember liking it, but it's just I haven't revisited it.
Yeah, I mean, get yourself outside of some of the more big hits and listen to some of the, if you could even call them deep tracks and stuff like that. But some of the other tracks on it, and like, it's just some really good stuff on there. In terms of the vocals, I'm not a big Anthony Kiedis.
Sure.
It's like whatever, but it's the music, between the three of them is awesome. And the different eras too. Like they just came out of having Josh Klinghoffer playing guitar for them for 10 years, and they did 2 albums and a bunch of tours with him. And his stuff is just, everybody was like, oh, we want John Frusciante back, but you don't know what you have until it's gone. And, John's back in the band now, and everybody's excited for a new record, which is going to be great. But man, the stuff Josh did with them is so cool. It's just so different. Like, so the 2 latest albums that came out in 2011 and then 2016, amazing stuff. And he has solo stuff. I could say he's one of my favorites right now. His solo act is called Plural One, and it's awesome. So good.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I haven't listened to that.
It's cool.
I'll add it to my Spotify.
There you go.
Nice. Yeah, this is a tough question. It's impossible for me to say top 3 favorite bands. I mean, it just depends on my mood. You know, like you just mentioned my Bloody Valentine. I'm like, oh God, I have to listen to them again. I haven't listened to them in ages, and I love them.
So good.
But I think it's like I sort of would kind of put this in like what mood I'm in. So if I want something mellow, maybe a little bit throwback, I'd probably listen to Calm Trues, or Tycho. Is something I'm really into. That's kind of like a good, like almost like this is not maybe the friendliest way to put it. But it's kind of like Wallpaper in a way where it's really good, like super mellow, calming, relaxing music that you just kind of evens things out. But then it's
that sometimes you need to listen to that kind of music.
Yeah, I guess if I'm going for something weird, I would go for like this band. I don't think they've made any music recently, but they're called Subtle, and it's just strange, weird kind of mix of hip hop and indie rock, and just weird, like just really super unique. I love it. And then Melt Banana is another one of those weird ones. If I want something really ridiculous, they're just a female singer, just crazy noisy guitar tones with all sorts of weird effects and just lots of screaming and just weird ass shit. And then lately I've been into really heavy music. So I've been into just like this band Daughters. I don't know if you're familiar with them. It's really dark, very heavy, brutal, pretty brutal. Back in the day I used to listen to like Converge. That's another one that's just really hard. I don't even really know how you describe it, but it's heavy ass stuff. And then there's a newer band called Bummer that I've been way into lately. And then, I think back of like what I used to listen to like in the 90s and early 2000s. It's all like post-punk, like Drive Like Jehu, Fugazi, Don Caballero is another weird one where it's just crazy, weird guitar tones and like ridiculously intricate drumming. So it really just depends on the mood. If I want something mellow, if I want something hard hitting, or if I want to like look, have something a little bit more of a nostalgia of like looking back to what I used to listen to, when I was in college or whatever.
Yeah.
It just kind of depends. But I will say in terms of listening to it in the cars, like all of my car stereos suck except for the Prius. So like if I want to listen to like music loud or like for it actually to sound decent, I have to drive my Prius. So which is like, bummer.
Yeah, the Charade only has a tape player and it doesn't work very well, and there's only one speaker. So it kind of is difficult to listen to music in there, but obviously in the Fit, it's got the Android Auto and Apple CarPlay.
Yes, exactly.
So it just makes things so much easier. But sometimes I do miss carrying that big ass 35-pound book of CDs around. Everybody that grew up in like the 90s and the early 2000s had to do like, oh, man, I gotta put in. I want to listen to Mr. Bungle. Shit, I gotta find that record. Oh, there it is, right there. Cool. Take out whatever Fugazi or whatever you're listening to, and then goes the Mr. Bungle CD. So it versus like Spotify where it's just like recently played. Yep, that's what I'm thinking about this week. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean I don't really love the new way of listening to music. You miss out on a lot of the context. It's just sort of like here's some music, and it devalues it. You just sort of view it as background a lot of times. Because you're not, for me, like it's like when you actually had something physical in your hands to say like I actually paid for this. I actually I supported the artist. And there was more to it. You could look at liner notes. I sound super old now, but it's like there was something to that of like knowing I can look at the liner notes and see like, hey, this person, here's the lyrics, here's who played on it, here's all that stuff. I mean, you can research that stuff. I think that's the thing that sucks about Spotify and things like that is that it gives you nothing. It gives you the title, the audio, and a picture of the album. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, I agree. It was nice to hold a physical piece of media in your hand and look at the liner notes. I used to love doing all that stuff too. Why I actually love something like Spotify is the fact that I can listen to all this stuff like I want to, that I never really got to listen to. Like I'll go through discover, I'll read an article about some guitar player I really like or something, or some bass player. And they're like, oh yeah, that maybe they cite an influence. So I go back and then there it is on Spotify and it's there. And I'm like, okay, cool. I get to, listen to it and hear it and like discover kind of, I don't necessarily discover new as it's brand new music, but new to me. So, I mentioned Mr. Bungle, like it's I haven't listened to them in forever. I had a friend that was really into them. I was like, I'm going to give them another try now. And like, I've been listening to them for like the past 2 weeks and I'm like, this is the craziest shit ever. I love it. It's so cool. It's just all over the place,
Well, yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, you didn't have to go out and buy the album and search it out and all that.
But at the same time, I feel bad because I don't, my Fit doesn't have a CD player in it or a tape player or a mini disc player. It's just there. And if I wanted to listen to a CD, like I think my wife's CRV has a CD player in it.
I mean, I hate physical media, like in terms of like the process, like it's so annoying, especially CDs. I loved cassettes because I could throw them in the back of the car and they wouldn't get ruined. But like the CDs, like you got to worry about it getting scratched. It was so annoying. I wish that mini disc had taken off as opposed to CDs because at least it was somewhat protected. But I totally get it. I just know that musicians don't make very much money on Spotify. So it's obviously it's sort of a different paradigm. It's sort of like half you're buying the music, half you're just renting it, half you're just listening to radio, so it's a new world. But I know that I wish there was a better way other than like just sending checks to musicians directly. I'm going to write a check to Mr. Bungle and say I appreciate you guys here.
Thanks.
I should probably just buy some t-shirts or something.
Yeah, that's true. That's one way to do it, but not everybody's going to do it unless you're like super inspired. Like, oh my gosh, I gotta buy a Dinosaur Jr. T-shirt. Whatever it is that you're listening to. I'm just like going down to the things that I know I have on my Spotify. That's like you're recently played like my top 16 albums of the past like few weeks, and I'm just like,
oh god, you should see my recently played. It's Moana soundtrack and the Cars soundtrack and Dora the Explorer. And
my wife's Spotify is messed up that way because she's the one that has the girls with her. So it's always like, oh, we're going to sing Into the Unknown for the 18th time on the 1 mile drive to grandma's house. So, it is funny when the Spotify, your top song of the year, like, I had, the Red Hot Chili Pepper song, whatever. But my wife's was like Into the Unknown by Adia and whatever her name is from Frozen. So it's just like, there's two different worlds there.
All right. So let's see. We got a couple more questions. We can do a few more. So Kit222 asks, what's the best way to find interesting sites and good roads for a day trip or a weekend trip? I've got a quick answer to this question. For me, it's quick check on Google Street View and then basically just heading out and driving around aimlessly.
Yeah.
Just drive and see what you find.
You got to have have a goal, I think, like there's a place you want to get to and stop at all the cool shit on the way there. If you see something that piques your interest, stop and take a look at it because you never know. It could be hiding behind the corner of a building or something like that. Maybe there's some guy's, bottle museum that he set up or some, you never know. So it's part of the adventure. So that's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah. And don't be in a hurry.
Yeah.
Minty 4-liter wagon view on K cars. What would be your favorite or dream K car? This is also an easy one for me. I can't fit in any of them. So none. I would say if I could fit in them, I would go with an AutoZam AZ1 because gull wing doors.
You could fit in some of the taller stuff, I think, because they have
like what's the Subaru van? The Sandbar.
Yeah. Or like a Suzuki Wagon R. is like kind of a
Yeah.
a tall K car. That's kind of a class I have over there. I devote too much of my day thinking about K cars. Especially right now, there's a lot of K car thoughts swirling around in my head because I would almost do anything to get my hands on one.
Yeah.
If my favorite K car, I mean, is here, I'm gonna say it again, is a Daihatsu Mira TRXX Avanzato, preferably like the 1990-91 model. So, yeah, 660 cc's of Fury, 60 horsepower, little tiny turbocharger. But
it's the size of a thimble.
It's the size of a thimble. It's the it's but it's awesome. They're legal for importation, and I really want one. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right. RD Chapman asks, I bought a 1990 Miata and it feels like I travel back in time when I drive it. Have you considered picking up a convertible? What do you think? What's your feeling on convertibles for you?
I like convertibles. I think I need to own a Miata at some point.
Yes.
Generational wise, I would take almost. I think they're all fine. Even the NC everybody shits on. I was like, it's a fine car. It does what it needs to do.
It's good.
But if I had to actually, if I really put some thought into it, I'd probably go with like an NB, kind of like what our friend Stephen Ewing has. He got a 10th anniversary, 15th anniversary model.
Jeez, I don't know. I think it might be 10th, right?
I love that. I love that combination. The tan, like leather interior and the dark exterior. It looks so good. And I know pop-up headlights are cool and all, but I really like the way the NBs look. They just look like little I don't know. I just like those. Yeah. I would do that. Obviously an S2000 would be up my alley too, as I fly the Honda flag at my house. But I don't know. It's a pure car and everything like that, but just it's not that they're getting pricey. It's just that all these cars, these like fun convertibles are getting trashed. Oh, Z4. I like Z4 and Z3s. I would do a Z3 or a Z4. I think they would be fun. So I would do a convertible.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm not a huge fan of convertibles. I prefer having structure over my skull. I don't know. I don't really get too much of a thrill of just having the top down and having the wind in my hair or whatever. I don't know. Maybe it's sort of a safety thing. I just feel like that you're a little bit exposed and a little bit vulnerable in a convertible. I already feel exposed and vulnerable in all my old crappy cars. Not having a roof just like adds to it.
Yeah, I anytime I've ridden in one, I always feel like, or driven one, I'm like, everybody's staring at me. Everybody's staring at me. And maybe that goes away if you like daily drive a convertible. Like, well, I guess you can kind of only really do that in Southern California, I guess, where that doesn't rain. But like, I just feel exposed. Like everybody's looking at this person driving a convertible, even if the convertible's like a Miata. Everybody knows they're all convertibles. Like, it doesn't matter. But that's just something I'd have to get over.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like if it was something like a Miata I have owned a Miata before. I had a spec Miata race car, and that had a hard top, had a roll cage and everything. So that was a different story. Obviously it was a convertible, but I didn't take advantage of any of the convertibleness of it. And it was a ton of fun to race around racetracks in Southern California. I would love to own a Miata, but I sort of like for the street, but I feel like I'd probably want some sort of roll bar, something where I feel like I'd have a little bit more of a chance in the potential case of a rollover. And I'd probably go like you. I'd probably go for an NB. Just anecdotally, when I was talking to spec Miata drivers, a lot of them would say that the NB was a lot easier to drive than the NA. And I had an NA. I had a 90. It was a 91, I think. It was either 90 or 91. I don't remember now. But apparently a little bit earlier ones, at least in spec Miata trim, were a little bit more frenetic. actually just harder to drive. It just took more driving skill to do the same thing that you could do in an NB. I'm not sure if that's the case for a street Miata, if you're just like going down canyon roads, but obviously the NB is a little bit heavier, a little bit more planted. So who knows? I'd probably probably just be a contrarian and go for an NC just because everybody hated it. And it's fine. It's probably, they race those too. And, I forget where did they race? I forget what class it was where they had a bunch of NC Miatas. Now I'm spacing on it now, but yeah, they're fine.
They ran them in like Pirelli World Challenge or whatever. They ran the touring cars, Miatas and stuff, or is the NCs? So
yeah,
they're fine. Yeah.
Nissan fan 89 asks, "How's the Stanza going?"
In my driveway. Did you ship it over here?
You can have it. If you can fix it, that'd be fine. So, Stanza wagon, 1986 Stanza wagon. This vehicle, it has some issues. I've had this car for a few years. Even a few years ago, it had some stalling issues, and I just hadn't driven it for a while. And I've been driving it a whole lot lately, and it just likes to randomly stall. And I've started replacing things. I put some new spark plug wires, new spark plugs. Waiting on the proper cap and rotor. So I'm like making like small updates to try to rectify this. Or a couple days ago, I was shooting a video with it, and it would stall when it would get warm. Like it would drive fine for 20 minutes, and then it would stall at every stoplight. And it'd be really hard to get the thing started again. So it was really difficult, you're driving around Los Angeles and you're like, okay, I'm stuck in the middle of an intersection and the car won't start. Like constantly. I was just I was going to take some photos of the car and it started acting up. So I was like, I'll just drive back home. And it was the most stressful drive back home just to get this thing home, to not like get stuck in the middle of a busy intersection. So I figured, well, maybe it's a fuel filter because it looks like it probably has the original fuel filter or the original 35-year-old fuel filter. So I replaced it today. It was a huge pain, very, very difficult to get to along the firewall, and lots of unscrewing screws that you can't see. So you have to you do it by feel. I suppose if I had a series of mirrors and lights and I don't know, I might be able to actually see what I was doing. I actually literally put my index finger on a screw and then looked at the indentation of my finger to see what kind of screw it was. Cause that was the only way I could tell what kind of screw it was. So I replaced the fuel filter. I put new hoses on it. Cause I figured, okay, well, let's replace the hoses too, which just do it the right way. Something that I thought was going to take me an hour, took me 3 hours. And I'd go for a test drive. It's actually worse with a new fuel filter. I'm like, how is that possible? So I have no idea. The only other thing I can think of is that there's something with the cap and rotor, or there's some other issue happening, or maybe it's the fuel pump is just not pumping well enough because it's super loud and super noisy. And I've always suspected that there might be something wrong with the pump. So yeah, it's sitting in my driveway and it starts every once in a while. Yep. Yep. Well, we can't leave the podcast on a Debbie Downer note like that. We can't. So how do we bring it back? How do we bring it back from the brink? How do we bring it back from me wanting to push this car off of a cliff? Maybe I should actually push the car off a cliff. That'll make me feel a whole lot better.
No, not the Stanza wagon.
Not the Stanza wagon. I'll get it going. I'm probably gonna. I think I'm at the limit of what I can do. I think so. I might have to bring this one back to the shop. I'm trying to do a lot of stuff myself. Trying to learn. There's a huge sense of accomplishment of replacing that fuel filter because I've actually never replaced a fuel filter before, and it's technically quite easy. Just some clamps and a part. But actually getting to the fuel filter was the challenge. So
yeah. I'm proud of you for getting it done. So I think about changing the fuel filter on the charade, and it's right there it's on the firewall, but it's about a 3.5 minute job. So I can't imagine where they put this poor fuel filter on this poor little car. I'll have to look next time I'm there and see and be like, now I see why. So
yeah, I mean, it was just a lot of. I would have had to have removed a lot of stuff. Like I removed the windshield wiper fluid reservoir to gain access, but there was just a lot of like just barely being able to get my hands in there. And I have like tons of scrapes all up and down my arms from just like scraping against hoses and stuff like that. Yeah, I talked to somebody else that also owns a Stanza wagon, and he just recently replaced his fuel filter as well. And he said, yes, huge pain in the butt. And in order to like actually like get it out, he needed to find somebody that had smaller hands. Like he's like, I think he asked his girlfriend or something like, can you please get in there and like pull this out? Yeah, it's in there pretty tight. But good news is the car is better than it was. Like I got it all cleaned up. It doesn't smell anymore. There's like a lot of things that are good about it, but just a couple things that I don't really know where to go next. So I'm gonna have to bring in the professionals.
Yeah. So. Well, I'm glad the car has come along this far. Like, it's kind of been no secret that out of the cars that you own, I really love the Stanza wagon. It's just such a Paul car. I mean, it's your car, but it's such a Paul, like everything about it. So I'm glad to see that progress is being made with it. So it's going to be a battle with a car, but I think once it's up and running to the point where it's going to be nice and reliable, it's going to be a good little car.
I think so. I mean, the thing only has 50,000 miles on this car. It's a 36-year-old car. And I did determine that it had the original spark plug wires on it. They say 1985 on the spark plug wires. And it very, very well could have been the original spark plugs too. They were super rusty. Yeah. And it's like I had some issues like finding parts for the car too. And you kind of dive into it a little bit more. And I finally determined that there's for the 1 year, this first year, the 80s, or not the first year, but in 86, like the first half of the year, they were using Hitachi distributors. And the second half of the year, they were using Mitsubishi distributors. So when I ordered the cap and rotor, they were for the wrong one. It's just like, that's information that nobody knows. Like there's very few people in the world that know that are still alive. Like people that designed this car, like, are they still around? Who knows?
Yeah.
So, a lot of that stuff you just don't know until you.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the latest video you had with it where our good old friends at Rock Auto kept sending you the wrong things. It's a risk you take with these older cars with harder to find parts. I've dealt with it with a Daihatsu, a good few times because Rock Auto is the only real resource that you can find. I'm trying to find more. But you're right. The knowledge that's out there for knowing that half the year they use Mitsubishi distributors and half the year they used a Hitachi, that's gone. Rock Auto or wherever, even AutoZone, it's like, nope, this is the cap and rotor for an 86 Sentra wagon.
And the thing is, like, apparently there's some sites out there that you can dig into like original OEM part numbers and that kind of thing. And actually, the only way I found out that there were two different kinds of distributors was actually on the Napa site. So like, I'm just going to start going to every possible parts site that I can think of just to try to get as much information as I can. Because that's probably what happened with the Mitsubishi. Whereas, maybe some parts were in there that were incorrect, but also during the production of the 1985 Galant, maybe they did use two different types of axles and three different types of spark plug wires. And, there could be changes they made in the middle of the year. I don't know. So,
there could have been.
Totally. So yeah, it's a challenge to try to bring some of these old cars back from the dead that nobody knows anything about. So I'm an idiot for trying to do that. So
well, I'm in the same boat. I look, for, basic stuff for my car. Like it really needs new front lower control arms, and AutoZone actually sells them. But, I bought them and found out that the control arms they're selling, they're actually for the Charade sedan, not for the hatchback. It has a slightly different design of the control arm. And I've figured that out with all the digging, but I'm probably the first person to have ever bought. The first idiot to have ever spent nearly $200 on 2 control arms for this silly little car. I, ended up not using them. Obviously, I returned them, and then, turned to my only other real choice, which is like eBay and like, Australia and Malaysia, Thailand, places where the car has been popular for all these years. Oh yeah, we got those things. Yeah, it's going to cost you $500 to get them up there. And it's like, hey. But it is what it is. If we want to keep these cars going and we care about them and love them to the level that is beyond insanity, then if that's what we got to do, then that's what we got to do. So I guess, I should just buy a crate and send it down to Australia and tell them, fill it up and send it back to me. That might be easy.
Just get a couple parts charades. That's all you need.
That would be helpful too.
All right. I think we got through almost all of the questions. I know we didn't get to all of them, but there were a lot of good questions, and I apologize if we didn't get to your question. We're kind of running low on time. But yeah, thanks everybody for coming up with these thoughtful questions for us. We had a ton of fun coming up with our answers, and we'll definitely do a Q&A again soon. So, all right. Well, let's wrap this up. Where can everybody find you, Paul, on the interwebs?
On the interwebs, you can find me at Paul's Finest Hour on both Instagram and Twitter, and that's it.
All right. Nice.
No face.
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Mr. Ethan Tufts, youtube.com/Hello Road. I'll have another video with the Stanza Wagon going up very shortly. And more information on the Autopia 2099 show coming over the next couple months. But there's a lot of stuff going on. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And we'll hopefully have another episode here soon.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Adios.
Bye-bye.